Welcome back everybody to another episode, and in today's episode we're going to be taking an in-depth look at swim jig fishing, so stay tuned. Alright guys, welcome back to another episode. Before we jump in, let me just say at 5,000 subscribers we are doing a rod and reel giveaway, so if you guys want to be entered in that, you gotta subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, if you guys are not subscribed to the channel, there's a little bell notification next to the subscribe button. Go ahead, hit that little bell notification. It just lets you know every time I upload a new video. I upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so 3 videos a week for you guys. So if you don't want to miss those uploads, you gotta hit that little bell notification. But like I said, 5,000 subscribers, rod and reel giveaway, so subscribe to the channel. Alright guys, so if you guys have been a fan of the channel for some time, or if you're new here, I fish a swim jig a ton, guys. Every single one of my videos I'm catching fish off of a swim jig. Always have one tied on the deck of the boat, ready to rock and roll. So I figured, why not, like, what better to do than a video about swim jig fishing, kind of taking a more in-depth look at like the different colors I use, the weights, the trailers, because there's definitely the biggest thing with a swim jig is the trailer, and that really is going to depend on the weight of the swim jig. Okay, you know, I use 1/4 ounce, 3/8, half ounce, sometimes an ounce, but for the most part just 1/4, 3/8, and half ounce. And when you get into those heavier jigs, the trailer is really gonna matter. So I figured let's take an in-depth look at these and what I use, and show you guys exactly my thought process on these. So first off, what is a swim jig? For those of you that don't know what a swim jig is, a swim jig here is just a jig type bait. I'm sure you guys have seen a flipping jig, a football jig, something like that. I'm sure most of you have seen a swim jig. It's a little bit lighter weed guard, a little bit lighter hook on these smaller ones. And the head's like a point, okay? It's more of a pointy style head, so it pulls through a lot of different areas. Now, where can you fish a swim jig? Like pretty much anywhere you can fish a swim jig, guys. You could throw it into thick grass, you can throw it on the edge of grass lines, you can throw it in rock, you can throw it around wood. A swim jig is really designed to pull through just about any area that you can think of. I particularly love fishing it around grass, especially fishing on the Mississippi River. There's a lot of vegetation this time of the year, and throwing this thing around grass and just knowing that I can cover a lot of water with this just works out super well for me. And it's that's mainly the reason why I love fishing it so much, is I can cover a lot of water with this bait and throw it around in a lot of different areas without having to worry about it getting caught up. How to work a swim jig? Really, working a swim jig, there's really nothing to working a swim jig. I think it's one of those baits that you can pretty much pick up, give to somebody who's a beginner to bass fishing, tell them to cast it out there and just reel it back. You know, keep the rod tip high, low, however you want to do it, and just reel it back. You don't have to reel it back fast. You can reel it back nice and slow, and it just will catch fish. And there's not much to setting the hook on a swim jig either. You feel them load up on the rod, you just lean into it. You don't have to set super crazy hard. Fishing a swim jig is pretty simple. You'll see a lot of people take their rod and they'll be bobbing it as they're fishing a swim jig. They'll be reeling it back and just like bobbing that rod. Okay, and what they're doing is they're giving action to the swim jig. I personally don't think you really need to do that with a swim jig at all. I think it really comes down to the trailer. So if you have your trailer figured out on that bait, it should be giving off plenty of action that you don't need to sit there and do that. If you prefer to do that, that's fine. I know people that do, but it gets a little annoying doing that all day. I've tried to do that myself, bob the rod as I go along swimming a swim jig, and it just drives me nuts. You're constantly just doing something that's just not natural. It just kind of wears on you a little bit too. But I really think it comes down to the trailer on a swim jig. So let's talk colors really quick. Okay, so black and blue is one of my favorite colors to throw for a swim jig. I love to throw white. All white swim jig. This is white and chartreuse. I will throw this one as well, but a white, it is, you know, it's pretty much white and chartreuse. Black and blue is pretty good. Kind of a bluegill style pattern of a swim jig. I mainly like to keep it to like 3 different colors. I will go like green pumpkin, bluegill, white, and then black and blue. I do have some black, blue, and purple ones. Those ones work really well for smallies, but pretty much I stick around those 3 colors. I don't get too fancy. I just try to mimic what's going on in the area. Black and blue, because sometimes around here the Mississippi River gets really stained, and black and blue just seems to work really well in that, and just catches you a lot of fish. And then I really like to switch over to white and fish this towards the fall time when those shad are starting to get into those coves and the bass are really starting to feed up. So let's talk trailers now. Now this is where things get a little complicated with the swim jig, and I don't mean that to like scare you guys or keep you away from fishing a swim jig. It's really not that complicated, but I really think the trailer really makes a big difference. Now we'll just start early season and kind of breeze through there really quick. So in the early season, when it's early springtime, you know, I'm gonna start out with fishing a craw. Now my favorite thing to fish is the rage tail, okay? Now I love to team this up with the black and blue swim jig in this time of the year. And this rage craw right here, you can see these appendages are pretty big. Now when this is on the back of a swim jig here, guys, it really gives off a ton of action in the water. This is really kicking really well. You can see that they just bat really well. This is great in the early spring when fish are starting to feed up on those crawfish and those crawdads moving along. It just mimics that food pattern really well. Now if I'm not getting bit off of this and I feel like the bite's just a little slow yet, I'm gonna downsize. Over to the Rage Menace here. Now the Rage Menace, I'll show you guys right now, is more of a grub style. As you guys can see, it's shorter. It's got two small appendages here. They don't kick very hard, but they still give off some pretty good action. If the bite is really not that great, I'm gonna switch over to the Rage Menace and I'm gonna slow that swim jig down. I'm really gonna try to maintain bottom contact and just really work it slow. This is killer for when you need to slow it down. It's like that grub style, and it's also really good for smallmouth. Sometimes smallmouth just want to see a little grub. If you've caught smallmouth out in like the Sturgeon Bay area, those guys will eat like little tiny 16th ounce hair jigs. So these, you can never go, I guess, too small, but I love to switch this up to, if the bite's really finicky, I'm gonna switch over to the Rage Menace and really hammer away with that. Now for my favorite trailer, the trailer that I think really is the most productive and catches me the most fish, and that's gonna be the Rage Swimmer here, guys. Now you could use a Kitech trailer as well. It's paddle tail swim bait here. I really like these on the back of a swim jig. Now I'll show you what that looks like here. Now I have this white swim jig here, and that's what it looks like on the back there. This is a really good setup. It's just a killer setup in the summertime and late fall. And what I love about this is just the fact, all the action you get with this. Now, let's talk about points of action here. Now when a fish is swimming through the water, you have their tail obviously is just moving back and forth. But what else do you see when a fish is swimming through? Not only is their tail moving back and forth, but their gills are bobbing, okay? Their fins are moving and whatnot, okay? Now you'll see a lot of guys fish just a normal swim bait, okay? Now they'll fish maybe just this paddle tail with a jig head. So it would look like that without the trailer, right? And all you're gonna see is this moving back and forth, okay? Now this gives you really good action going through the water. This is gonna go back and forth as you're pulling through. But that's just one thing, one point of action. Now, what really makes the swim jig special is the skirt, guys, okay? Not only do you have that pointed head where you can throw this swim jig anywhere, but you have this skirt, and that skirt, as this is going through the water, this tail's gonna be moving, but this skirt's gonna be flowing, okay? And that's really gonna show off, you know, the gills or the fins moving, okay? That's where the swim jig just looks really realistic to a predator fish in the summertime and late fall. Now, for a light swim jig, like this one right here is a 1/4 ounce swim jig. You can pretty much throw whatever kind of trailer you want on here, and because it's such a light swim jig, the trailer's pretty much gonna give this a bunch of action. Like with this paddle tail here, not only is it going to be moving, this is actually gonna be bobbing back and forth. This swim jig will be bobbing back and forth. Like as it's being pulled through, it'll bob, and this will be kicking. Okay, now I'm kind of exaggerating it. It's not gonna bob like that, but it'll be bobbing a little bit as it's going through the water because this trailer is gonna make it do that. Now, where things get tricky is when you start to get up to a 3/8 or 1/2 ounce swim jig. Now, the benefits of fishing 3/8 to 1/2 ounce swim jig Now here's the benefits for that. If you're fishing an area that's not very pressured, if you're fishing a lake that you don't have many bass fishermen on it, you know that it doesn't get pressured that much, just stick to throwing that 1/4 ounce swim jig. I wouldn't worry about going up in weight at all. But now, if you're fishing an area that's pressured pretty hard by other bass fishermen, I would go to 3/8 or 1/2 ounce. And now this is what I mean by that. If you've ever fished a patch of grass or reeds and whatnot, if you throw this 1/4 ounce into those reeds and whatnot, your bait's gonna sit to the top of those reeds. It's not gonna sink down very far, okay? And the only time you're gonna get a bait in there is if you're fishing a frog, a swim jig, or you're punching, okay? Now you may see guys punching in that thicker grass or whatever and they're getting bites, right? Well, this is where a big 1/2 ounce swim jig comes in handy, because you can cover a lot of water faster than using a punching rig, but you can take that 1/2 ounce and throw it into that thick grass, and instead of using like a 1/4 ounce where it's gonna sit at the top of that grass, sit up here, a 1/2 ounce is gonna punch down in, okay? And then you're gonna be able to swim and rip that 1/2 ounce through that grass, and it's gonna be down underneath, okay? Instead of sitting up here and fishing up here like everybody else is, you're gonna get that advantage on everybody, and you're gonna punch down in, because not many people are gonna fish that 1/2 ounce swim jig. You're gonna be able to punch in and rip and pull that through the grass and get those bites on those fish that aren't normally gonna be there for a lot of people. Now also, when you get into fishing a 1/2 ounce bait, swim jig, this trailer right here, this Rage swimmer and the Kitech, you see how these things really bend when when I have it up and down here? You can see that it's just bending like pretty much halfway over. Now if you take a normal, this is more of like a hollow body swim bait paddle tail here. If you take one that's not hollow body, and unfortunately I don't have one here with me, but what I mean by that is it's all harder plastic in here, and you'll know because when the trailer's sitting, it'll sit like this. It'll pretty much sit with only the tail right here flapping over. Okay, it'll sit pretty darn straight up and down. Now what that's gonna do for you with a heavier swim jig, especially a 1/2 ounce swim jig, is you need a tougher paddle tail when you're pulling that through there with that 1/2 ounce, because if you just put one of these on a 1/2 ounce swim jig, you're not gonna get that wobble out of your trailer. Your trailer is gonna move back and forth like this, the paddle tail will, okay? But it's not gonna be heavy enough. The trailer will not be heavy enough to make that swim jig bob back and forth. So you need a little bit tougher paddle tail to make a 1/2 ounce swim jig bob back and forth, because you want both of that action. You want that action from the swim jig paddle tail going back and forth, but you also want that action from the swim jig bobbing back and forth. And that's really where it kind of gets tricky. But like I said, a 1/4 ounce swim jig in non-pressured areas works pretty darn well. I use a 1/4 ounce pretty much like 95% of the time on the Mississippi, and a lot of those pools are highly pressured. I will switch to a 1/2 ounce if I'm around a lot of grass and I'm trying to cover water but get down into the grass. I'll switch to a 1/2 ounce, and I'll switch up my trailer to a tougher paddle tail to really give that 1/2 ounce swim jig a little more action. Now the setups, as you guys know, my favorite setup I have right here. This is a ALX Icos Promise 7. This is a medium heavy fast action rod. I'm running it on 20-pound fluorocarbon because of all the grass that I fish this around, on a 7.3-to-1 high-speed reel. This is just an all-white swim jig here, but this is my favorite setup for throwing a 1/4 ounce. If I'm gonna throw a 1/2 ounce swim jig, I'm probably gonna move up to the ALX Icos Hammer 7.3. That's a heavy action rod, just because you're fishing in thicker grass, and if you're gonna fish a frog in thick grass, you're probably gonna use a heavy rod. So if you're gonna fish a swim jig in thick grass, you might as well use a heavy rod. You're gonna need that big stout rod to get that fish out of there. But for the most part, I just go with the Promise 7, a medium heavy fast action rod. Works really, really well for a swim jig. But like I said, if I get into that heavier, that 1/2 ounce, I'm gonna switch it up and fish a heavier rod. So there you have it, guys. That is pretty much my in-depth dive on fishing a swim jig. If you guys have any questions, go ahead, drop them in the comments below. I will do my best to answer them. If you guys fish a swim jig yourself and you have some tips or tricks, drop it in the comments below, share the knowledge. But that is pretty much my in-depth dive on swim jigs. It can be a little tricky, but for the most part, swim jig is a great lure for anybody to use. It just, You can throw that sucker just about anywhere. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and until next time, keep fishing hard.
Silky bee.